All right. Well, welcome to another Consults Over Coffee. I'm Dr. Michael Jones, and I am joined today by Richmond artist Janet Scagnelli, who I met because you work out at Redefine RVA, which is where my wife works. And that's how we met and then kind of crossed paths up in Northside, up in Bellevue at Porchella or various things. And I got familiar with your work, and I was really impressed with how you used, and we'll get more into this in a minute, but with how you used your art to process and work through difficult periods in your life. And that resonated with me because when I was a clinical investigator working with patients with irritable bowel syndrome and other digestive diseases, we did a fair amount of stuff with journaling as a tool for symptom relief and improvement. And in fact, people who wrote daily about how they felt about their illness and what it did to them, how it impacted the quality of their life, actually were physically better than folks who just spent the same amount of time writing about the weather. And so that self-expression, whether it's painting, journaling, drawing, whatever, is a powerful therapeutic tool. And we've talked about this a little bit, and I did want to kind of give the caveat because for years you were a professional illustrator. Is that?
Yeah, a professional commercial artist in animation.
Ren and Stimpy. I am.
Yes. Well, Fritz the cat, if you go back even further, but
I'm even more impressed now.
oh, yeah, Fritz the cat. But in New York City, it was commercial. New York City was a place that commercials got done, ad agencies, commercials. LA was more where features or TV shows, series were made. But my older sister worked at Terry Toons that did Mighty Mouse and
Yeah.
I think Tom Terrific, and she used to bring work home when I was about 13 years old and said, "Help me, I got overtime, I got to finish the stuff. You can do this." So I started working at 13, and then I'd go into the city, and we lived in the Bronx, and I get studio work. I mean, totally underage, hiding in the bathroom from the union people. But it was, I made good money for a teenager, and I learned a lot of my skills there. Um, but I went away to college and got a degree in art history. But as soon as I was done, I was right back in the city working in animation because I loved it and I knew it, and I was climbing the ladder at that point. Yeah, so it's commercial art. It was all commercials. I opened my own studio. I ran some studios and then opened my own studio, Chelsea Animation, and did a lot of commercials like Cheerios, Hershey's chocolates, AT&T. Um, I don't know, tons of cereals and Braun razors and dog food.
So,
I was working with high end clients. Yeah.
but then you moved from New York and you moved down to Richmond.
Yes. So I'm for love. I met a guy who lived in Richmond. I was like, "Where's Richmond?" And a year later, I moved here. But I moved my business down, Chelsea, and I had opened a second business by then where I was restoring vintage animation cells that people would collect. Like I'd go to Sotheby's and Christie's with my clients and advise them, and they'd buy pieces and I restore them. And there were only two of us in the world at that time doing this work. So I had international clients, and that was very exciting. So, but anyway, all my work was commercial work. It was never anything. I would put my personal touch on these pieces, but I always felt safe because I was behind. I was making Cheerios look good, or Fruit Loops, or uh, I made so I was very comfortable in that world, um, but it bothered me too that I couldn't do anything personal and expressive.
But then you did.
Yes, yes, and because with my major in art history, I could appreciate what artists. I'd stare at these paintings and think, how did they get this on that piece of paper or that canvas? It was a mystery to me that was elusive. Um, and I guess I closed my studio, raised a family, and I started taking some classes. Like I was doing still lifes and pastels, and even that was scary to me because it would be my drawing, but it was still lifes, nothing big, but it was getting boring. And also, my husband got this mysterious illness that got worse and worse, and there was a day I was sitting at home at this table, just kind of painting, working on a still life, and I was reading about Charlie Hebdo attack, these terrorist attacks in Paris. And what really got me was that across town, they attacked a kosher market. And I just felt like, why did they do that? They did that to distract from the Charlie Hebdo attack. Um, but it was just such an innocent target with families shopping for food way across town. And that just triggered me. And all of a sudden, I just pushed everything aside and I took some paper and I just started slashing. I found a picture of the kosher market and it had police tape and there was some kind of explosion in the middle. And I just started making versions of that with just, I ended up taking my library card and smearing paint on the tip of it, on the across the side of it, and smearing it, and just smearing and scraping and rubbing and scratching.
So folks who will watch this will see. I think I have an example of a still life, the painting with the fruit on the table, and then is the piece after that the piece that you're talking about with.
Red and black and
Yeah, that's just, I mean, talk about a fairly radical departure in styles.
yeah, and then actually the point that I got to with those pairs was I had taken maybe a year's worth of classes to get to that, and I was satisfied with it, but in a like a very boring way. I was like, that's nice, but that yeah,
Right.
like I check, but that this I made about 12 paintings of that market, that kosher market, but I didn't show it to anybody. And that was, I think, the key for me was that no one was going to see these. I just, they came out of something ripped open. It came out and then it went back in again and closed up. And I didn't, it was months before I showed a good friend who's an artist. I showed it to her one day and she just said, oh my gosh, that's incredible. She's, and I said, no, no, I'm not an artist. You're an artist. I'm not an artist. And she talked me into showing that painting to a few people.
Yeah,
And
can you just spend a minute or two and kind of walk us through this, because it's an interesting piece. When I look at it, it 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 struck me as sort of a constrained outburst in a way. If that, I don't know if that's an accurate. I mean, it really is. It's sort of an emotional meltdown on paper. It,
yeah, it
that's
was.
kind of why I look. I mean, that um, but what's represented in that other than your emotions at the moment? I mean, is that the market? Is that sort of your take on the market, or?
Right. There was a photo, and the whole front of the store was in the photo. It looked bluish glass, and there was police tape, and but I'm looking at it myself now. Um, I mean, I guess I could just say again that my husband's illness, which we didn't know what the hell was going on, and it was getting worse, and this terrorist attacks, and I think there was a few before this one too, but this one just triggered me, and it really was like I needed a reference point. So I had this photo in front of me and I needed that as a reference. But then I just looked away from it and I just started smearing paint down and just smearing and smearing. And I think, yeah, I put tape down to do the police stripes. So I laid down some tape, smeared the white and red stuff, pulled the tape up. Um, Smeared a lot with, like I said, my library card. And um, yeah, I guess it was a lot of like stenciling and going back and forth. And plus, I was doing 10 at the same time. I had them all laid out on my table, and some were small, and this one is pretty large. Um, but I was working on all 10 at the same time. And I was just
Wow.
grabbing one, throwing something on it, pushing it aside, grabbing the other one. And so it's interesting that if you see all maybe 10 or 12 of them, they're all they kind of have those colors in them, but they all look different. Some are more rippy, just, destructive looking than others.
Did you feel better after you did this? Was
Oh
it
my gosh, yeah.
cathartic?
Oh yeah. And I have to say it was like I think something you were just talking about the maybe this happens with journaling is I lost track of time. Like I just dropped out of my brain of all the worries I had, and I had two children also that were getting stressed about my husband's illness, their dad. So there was a lot going on, and I was holding a lot in my head. And I was painting these paintings, and I lost. I was just checked out. I was in this feverish state of I don't know. It was a great feeling. It was a very addictive feeling.
No, and I think that's kind of the point. I worry in the sense that folks who see this go, well, she could do this because she's an artist, but you don't have to be an. I mean, to do this, you have to be an artist, but to reap the benefits of this, you don't have to be Picasso, Van Gogh, Janet Scagnelli. You just have to be willing to express your feelings. And that's what we saw with journaling, is just get it out there, whether it's writing it out, whether it's doodling, whether it's, whatever works, but that expresses the emotional cost or burden of what you're dealing with. And that's therapeutic. That's a powerful therapy.
Right. I think the most important part for me was that I did not want anyone to see this. I did not make this art with that in mind, that I have an audience, or like I'm making this painting because I'm going to sell it or I'm going to show it in a gallery. It was the opposite of that. I needed to have a safe space to do this without ever planning to show it to anybody. And I mean, I guess coming back to your point of doesn't matter what skills you have, if you just sit down and just throw something down, whether it's poetry or writing or music. If you just get rid of the piece that somebody else is going to see it or judge it, I think you can get more close to that place that I just described. That
It's funny because I've done that with my writing. Sometimes we all get into dark places and we all have difficult moments. And it's been helpful to me to sort of put those words on paper. Periodically, I make the mistake of sharing it to somebody, and usually with someone, usually the response is, "Do you need to talk to somebody?"
Oh
I'm
yeah.
like, "Not now. I feel a lot better now."
Well, if we look at some of my other work that came after that one, yeah,
Well, and that it
I
is. It's
scare
interesting
people.
because the next two that you sent me are more black and white,
Uh,
right? I mean, it's again, it's there's a tension. When I look at them, I see a lot of tension, and it's a little frenetic, but it's also, they seem a little more constrained and cooler to me. Am I, can you walk us through these?
Yes, and I think what I want to back up and say, well, maybe it starts with these black and white ones. Right after my husband died, it was in October 2016. Um, like a month later, I called uh, this man I know, Michael Pierce. I know him from Quaker Meeting, and I said, I know you teach art somewhere. And he knew a bit about Steve dying. And he said, you must take my class. It starts January 4th at John Tyler. And you must take my class. This is going to help you a lot. And I was like, no, 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 no. It's too soon. But he said, you audit it, just show up, do it, get what you want out of it. And it was an intro to drawing. It's like, I can draw. He goes, no, I don't care. Take my class. So these paintings from a drawing class that um, so I think out what how the procedure went. So I decided that at the end of the last thing of the class is just draw anything you want that only you could draw. That's Michael's assignment all the time in every class. So I took photos of Steve when he was healthy, and Trump had just gotten elected, and I had newspaper clippings of that. And my home, which used to be something of a peaceful, safe place, was where the illness happened, the death happened, my children fell apart. It was suddenly my home was not a safe place anymore. I took photos of my home and Xeroxed a whole bunch of them. And then I shredded everything in my sandbox in the backyard, made a pile, took those wooden matches with the red tips, lit the pile on fire and videotaped it. And then I freeze framed 4 spots in this strip of film. And that's what these are. I actually used the charcoal from the burn for some of this too. And so it's a progression. And these are the first, that's one with the flame. The flame is in colored pencil. That was the first one. And then that second one is the third of 4. And they're it's like that big. Yeah, about that big. And they took me months. It took me a month to do each one. Um, I actually didn't even finish them for the class, but I finished them over the next summer. And they are so hard for me to look at now. I have friends who bought them from me and they hung them in their foyer and they repainted their whole foyer to match my paintings. And
Wow.
I know I'm very touched by it, but I can't look at them. I mean, I had to wrap them up and stick them in a closet because they're so powerful to me. But again, I did them in a safe place because I did them in a class with a teacher who is he makes it a safe place to express yourself. And that's his goal, is to get students
It
to express themselves.
it 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 looks like, I mean, it seems like it's a catharsis of some.
I had to show it for my critique. I only had 2 done by the time the class ended. And I was crying, and many of the people in the classes came up and hugged me afterwards because I told my story and I told why I did what I did. And it truly was a drawing only I could make, and the way only I could make it. And that was his assignment. But I think it was assignment that I needed, and it reverberated with me. And there were one or two other, mostly 18 and 19-year-olds in the class that did paintings that were as powerful as mine. It was a very good assignment if you were ready for it. But I still felt like I didn't want to show these to anybody. You
Well,
know,
they're go figure. I mean, they're incredibly personal,
yeah,
and it's traumatic.
yeah. And I
So
also didn't think it would. I mean, I wasn't making them for anybody else to look at and or anyone else to, I didn't think they'd reverberate with anybody else. Like I didn't think I was that kind of artist. And it didn't matter to me, you know, so it was pure me. And I think maybe going back to, you know, that fascinated me that people improved their irritable bowel syndrome by journaling. I didn't realize that was a thing that could happen, and it was happening for me. But you know, like at journaling, I'm sure you're not thinking, "Oh, I'm going to show this journal to other people." I made these paintings not thinking I was going to show them to anybody.
right, and I think that's the thing, that you're not drawing a Cheerios box here. You're bearing your soul.
Yeah,
And
scary. It was very scary.
it it is, and I think if you are an artist, and whether you're a musician, whether you're a writer, whether you're a painter, whatever, whether you make glass, the I think the idea of exposing yourself in that way to people is it's a little frightening at times. and
Yeah,
and we've probably talked about this. I think you kind of live in if you're a creative person, you live in these two worlds. On the one hand, you don't want people to look at this, or you don't want people to look at it and go, what the hell did you do that for?
yeah,
But at the same time, the validation that, like, you know what, this worked, this resonated with people, um is that validation is powerful.
yes. I had an argument once a long time ago with someone who said art needs to be shown to other people. Art is about the relationship of the viewer, listener, reader, you know, to the piece. And I said, no, I was so adamantly saying that is not, you know, I took the other tack, which is how I started with these paintings was I don't need to show this to anybody. In fact, I don't want to show it to anybody. But then I showed it and people responded. And I think because my paintings are about grief, um, I found that someone came up to me because we'd have these shows at the end of the school year, and my piece would be in a group show, you know, with other artists, students, and someone said, I just lost my mother, and these paintings really resonate with me, and it shocked me I that they were more they were they were personal, but they were not so personal that somebody else couldn't enter them. You know, that they found the entry point, and that intrigued me.
But I think there may be two sides of that. On the one hand, the art that you create it from a certain place, but then as the viewer or listener or reader, that person brings their own experiences and current state of mind
Yeah,
when they look at it. So, I mean, the perception of anything is not truly objective.
right. But I thought that my paintings would do like what you said about some people would go, ugh, why'd you do that? You know, I do have one friend, a good friend, that goes after now I've taken this class about 7 times, so I've got bodies of work every time, which as you'll see, my style changes because I choose to go, okay, for this 8 paintings, this is why I want to do this style, because this is my thought is I have to find the style that fits my feelings. And but she looked at like 3 or 4 versions of my series and she'd go, "Can't you paint something happy?" You know, and I go like, "Nope."
Draw me Fritz the cat.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, which is edgy. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Well, so speaking of a change in style, the next piece, and I should have, it is actually more animation, right?
It is, and I realize, even the fact that all these, every time I take this class and I do a body of work, they are a series, and I love doing 6 of a kind, 8 of a kind. That all of these pieces that I've made, I feel they're stronger because they're sitting in amongst the others. That really, I can't imagine not doing that. That this is my style. I love the fact that I do 8 versions of something because
Yeah.
they talk to each other. And actually, as we get further along, there's one set of botanical paintings, and people kept saying to me, "Which one do you like the best?" And I said, "In front of them, I can't tell you because I don't. They'll hear me, and I don't want them to know which one is my favorite."
Don't
Like
pick
children.
favorites.
Yeah.
The tell me about it. Well, I'm blocking on the chart that for
Oh, it's
the
sorry. It's a
go ahead. No, go ahead.
phenakistoscope.
Phenakistoscope. That's
Yeah,
it.
PHE. It's Greek. PHEN, phenokistoscope, and it's an early form of animation. And maybe some people might be you might be familiar with the drum that spins, and you look through a slot in this drum, and it's a continuous drawing inside that. When you rotate the drum, you see the character moving. Um, a zoetrope. And
Yeah.
zoetropes, they're a little more familiar, if anything, but this was another version of it, maybe before, I don't know, it's right around the same time that people would make these things. And they had a contraption that you put your disc in it and you'd crank this thing. But it has to do with mirrors. You need mirrors and you need that slot. But it basically, it was one of my watercolor projects, and I wanted to express Steve dying, and I don't want to forget him. So I was trying to think of something that would show a never-ending story. And this kind of work, I was thinking of a flip book at first, but a flip book has a beginning and an end. A film has a beginning and an end. Songs beginning and end, books
Right.
beginning. But this doesn't have a beginning or an end to it. It's continuous. It spins continuously. And this is his favorite bird was a pileated woodpecker. And then I think, what is it? The yin yang sign and the ankh, I think I'm saying ankh, the Egyptian sign for
Yeah.
life. And the blue circle is a heaven. And that morning glory is something that represents life. And so it keeps blooming.
It's interesting when I look at this that this has changed. I look at this and the coloring is different. It's it's delicate
Mhm.
in a way. Um, it's more alive.
Yeah.
It's interesting to me that there was this pretty radical departure or an evolution from where you were earlier. Is
Well,
that fair, or is it just a technical?
no, it's true. And I think, well, we could talk about grief. Grief doesn't go in a straight line from like very full of grief to I'm done with grief. It undulates and it comes up at times when you don't expect it. You could just be driving in your car and just burst out crying 2 years later. And so sometimes some of my pieces were in a I was resigning to my new life, and I was feeling more accepting and peaceful, and sometimes I wasn't. And
Yeah.
so sometimes that's, I think, why, and sometimes whatever was going on in the world or in my family, so I think I was in a more peaceful place here and more reflective.
Well, because the following two prints, which we'll get up on the screen here when we do this, seem to be a bit of a return to your previous style.
Yeah, I'll say. I'll say this was on a paper called Yupo or Durlar. It's a plastic paper. It's plastic, which means that paint, you can put paint down and it doesn't soak in. So you could take a paper towel and wipe it up. You could take a wet brush and smear it around. It just lays on top. You could wipe the whole thing off and start over again. So it was a very challenging paper, but I wanted to try it. And I made 6 paintings, and I took images from that last year that were very upsetting to me. And these two happened to be Charlottesville. Some of the other ones were Syria, and there were a few from Greece, Lesbos, when the refugees were coming across and drowning and trying to get onto the land, and it was, a horrible time. Um, these two were Charlottesville, and and I think you can kind of tell that it's not a party. Like the first one at first when I did it, it looked like a party, and then I needed to make it more disturbing. So I think I put in that Confederate flag. But the image. I mean, I'm sure
Oh
everybody
yeah,
knows that image of that night with those guys marching with those torches in Charlottesville.
yeah, right, of all places, right?
Yeah, and that second one is that photograph of when that car crashed into the people. That woman died. People were flying up in the air. Shoes were going. I mean, it's in a very incredible photograph that's so disturbing. And I made that painting, and I worked on it and worked on it. Um, and I masked off a square, a rectangle to work in, and then I pulled the masking off and I painted outside the edges because it just couldn't be contained in that rectangle. The anger and the terror, the horror was so huge that it had to come out of the square and the rectangle. And then I still didn't feel it was enough. So this one I took outside in my driveway and I ran it over with my car a bunch of times. So it's got holes in it from the gravel, and I'd squeeze paint on it, and then I'd run it over and get out and look, squeeze more paint, run it over a bunch of times. So I think you can see tire tracks up in the upper right corner.
Yeah, actually, you can.
Yeah, I'm sure my
I
neighbors.
wouldn't I wouldn't have guessed that until you just told me, but I see what you're saying.
Yeah, I'm sure my neighbors thought it was nuts.
It worked. It worked. But then you sort of return to something a little more delicate, right? I mean the plants.
Oh, right. Well, I think the very next one is the leaves falling.
Yeah.
So I took a piece of watercolor paper that's my height and my width. This is a self-portrait. And so, it's like 5'7" and whatever, 20 something inches wide. And then I walked around my neighborhood and I picked up leaves that made me think about different times in my life and living, because I lived in that house I raised our family for 25 years in that house in North Side. And these were leaves that just, everyone that I picked up, I had a thought about a memory. So I brought them back and started painting them, and each one, maybe it's like 4 or 5 inches large, and it would take a day or two to paint one of them. Um, but they're falling, and
Yeah.
they're gathering at the bottom, and it's about resigning myself to what turns my life took. Um, and all these paintings, whether they're peaceful looking or delicate or angry, they're all mine in the end, as angry or destructive they are. I, in the end, they're mine, and I feel like I don't know how to say. I won. I don't know, in a way, like I conquered something in doing this, and and certainly the ones we're looking at are the ones that are successful. I mean, I do a whole bunch of stuff that isn't, but that's just for me. I mean, they're all about me first, and I don't think about who I'm going to show these to.
Right. And that, I mean, that gets back to our kind of original point, which is, this isn't about pleasing someone else. This
Yeah.
is about working through difficult emotions.
Yeah.
And
And
and the value in doing something like this, in helping you to do that. I mean, I look at the falling leaves, and I may be wrong, because this is my interpretation of that. I look at that and I kind of go, I get a sense, as we move through grief, that this is part of the acceptance of what's transpired.
right. And it's autumn, which is
Yeah.
the time of year where things are dying, but they're dying and they look beautiful at the same time. I mean, I feel like all my paintings are beautiful to me.
Yeah, no, this, I mean, just on its face value alone, you look at how things are arranged, I look at the colors, I look at it and go, that's really pretty. Like, just first blush, and then you kind of realize, well, what's it represent? But it certainly represents your grief in a very different way than I'm slashing paint on a canvas with my library card, or I'm driving over things in my driveway. It's coming from a different perspective. It may
Yeah,
be the same process, but it's a different point in the process. Is that fair?
exactly. I have a friend whose wife died a year after Steve died, and we were all good friends. And he wrote a book, a book of poems, and some of them are very angry, and some, I mean, it's almost a parallel thing. I got what he was doing. Like, some of them are peaceful and short or lovely, and some of them are angry. Uh, and they mix up. You go back and forth with those feelings.
Well,
And I
again,
spent months on these things. I mean, each one of these series takes me about 4, 5, 6 months. So I have to really feel like I want to live with this for the next 6 months.
it when you start one of these, I'm sure that you're in a certain place. Is it can it be difficult to come back to them later, and sort of recapture? Do you have to kind of recapture where you were emotionally when you started that, or have you sort of at that point done enough to lock it in that you know what you need to do?
You mean like each painting over the 4 months or 6 months?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
e- each one is different than the other. Like, I want them to be different but also related. So when I pick up my next one to do, or maybe I'll go back and forth, sometimes with that one on the Yupo paper that I ran over, I had 6 of them. And sometimes I would evolve into something and I go, oh, that one could use a little of this. And I go back and forth. So they're all different. I know I'm engaged. I'm totally engaged in that theme for that period of time.
So you can retain that and go back to it, even if you're not emotionally in the same place that you were when you conceived the project.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So far, So far, so good. And the one I'm working on now, it didn't take me 4 months. It's taking me more like 9 months, which is it's a challenge now. But I draw every night. I mean, this is my go-to thing every night. I can't wait to get in my art room and sit down with my drawing. And I get, because I don't know, to say it's like addictive, it's like my fix. Like I need to go there and clear my brain and sit there
What
for
it
1 or 2 or 3 hours.
it strikes me as being sort of self-care, almost
Yeah.
nurturing, self-nurturing
Yeah.
in a way. I mean, and then again, that gets back to, these are beautiful and you're obviously really, really talented. But for people who are listening, you could just sit down and write what you saw today, or what upset you today, what made you happy today. I mean, and really essentially derive similar benefits, physical and emotional benefits from doing it. I mean, and there's good literature to support that. And I'm kind of giving it the big, you know, scientific research spin on the whole thing. But I mean, if you go back to Vonnegut would tell go sing in the shower, go
Yes.
dance while you're cleaning the house. It's you will write a poem for someone and it can be a terrible poem, but
Yeah.
you will have done something and you will have made something, and you'll be better for it.
Yes, yeah. And it's probably part of my personality is that I do care what people I care a lot about what people think of me. So the fact that I gave myself permission to not show this stuff to anybody was the perfect frame for me to move in to try this. Like those first paintings of that kosher market, I didn't show anybody those paintings. I mean, there was no way I was going to show anybody those paintings because they were scary and they were personal. And that wasn't, it was a friend that helped me. But this class with this teacher, Michael Pierce, he makes his classes safe. So I guess my studio opened up to allow that classroom to be safe.
Right, right. And
But
I think we have people that I'm comfortable sharing things with. um and then there are other people that, like, no, there's some stuff I'm not going to open myself up that way.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
So, and that's fine. But again, ultimately you do this for you.
yes. And
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 that's
it overflows to other things. Cool, that's great, but it's really ultimately for myself. And I mean, sadly, I had a traumatic thing happen to me in my life, and that's what launched all this. But I think everybody's got crappy days and hard times and things that are difficult. And I think this kind of, if it's whatever it is, if it's drawing or it's writing, I mean, to me, writing a poem looks totally mysterious to me, or playing music like you do is total mystery to me. But if that triggers something in you, that's the most important part of it, I think.
Well, and I think we all have different ways, we have different ways that I think we express ourselves. And for some people that's painting, for some people that's writing, for some people it may be sewing
Yeah. Oh, yes.
or knitting. I mean,
Gardening.
we create things that may reflect our lives, and we may do it in different ways.
Yeah.
And maybe cabinet making. It
And maybe what?
Cabinet making. I mean, you
Yes.
could be a
Oh, yeah.
woodworker, and it's the same process. And I think the societal flaw is that, it's sort of like this giant, we live in this world of America's Got Talent,
Mm,
where, will someone tell me that I am the greatest singer? I'm the next big thing. And it's like, dude, it's not about being the next big thing. It's about something you feel compelled to express.
Yeah, and there's so much pressure from outside too, right? Like, well, if you're not perfect, well, then what are you? It's like, why are you even doing that? You know, people are quick to judge, and social media. I mean, there's just so much outside pressure um, that
Well, we
you
do.
need.
I think it's a society that values the result
Yes,
or the monetization
yeah,
rather than the process.
yeah,
You
and
know, and
and
it's
I,
like, it's the same thing. I mean, Debbie deals with all the time. Like, I want to be, I want to weigh 50 pounds less and be able to bench press twice my body weight and win a marathon. It's like,
tomorrow, right?
right. And it's like, well, no, it's really about the process. It's about go out and do something today. You don't have to run a marathon today. Go for a walk around the block.
Right. And so
You
it
know,
becomes more important about what everybody, how everyone sees you. And that's, we've gotten so far away from figuring out what we need and what we want and what works for us best, and not thinking about taking a selfie or, you know, posting something. It's where we have come a long way from it.
well, and that's why I'm really glad that you're sharing this for and for people to see this, because none of these things, none of what you're sharing here are exactly alike, and stylistically they're very different.
Yeah, that worried me for the longest time. It's like, why don't I have a style? What's Janet Scagnelli painting? Nobody can recognize a Scagnelli painting. And I thought, and I look at all, I have art, there are artists in town or, you know, in history. You oh, that's, you know, that's a Mondrian. You know, we could spot that a mile away. I'm all over the place, but I had decided that I have a theme going on. And like I think I said earlier, that when I come up with an idea, I think about what medium, what style is going to fit my idea. And so they all are coming from chaos and grief and destruction and rising up out of that.
Yeah, I was going to say a lot of the the falling leaves, and then we'll get to the botanical stuff in a minute. Again, are more sort of almost. I mean, you can say, well, it's autumn and things are dying, but the piece is more there's more order and structure, and I would say innate. Like, you look at it and go, well, that's pretty,
Yeah.
right? I mean, just the casual, as opposed to, geez, a bomb went off in here, an emotional bomb went off here, and this is catharsis.
Yeah.
So it's a gift to be able to express that in different ways. I mean, in the music world, it's akin to someone who is a versatile jazz musician who you find on stage, playing, in a heavy metal band. It's like, well, yeah, I got that too. And
Yeah.
it's just about it's about a vocabulary, and that comes with time. I mean, at least in my world, it's like it's just a matter of learning that vocabulary.
Yeah. And I think, I mean, animation, because we didn't mention this, but I didn't do computer animation. It was all hand drawn work. And my studio, what I specialized in was not just the flat paintings that I don't know, like a Yogi Bear, you know, that's typical flat paintings. But I did a lot of rendering, like we did colored pencil animation where we were drawing with a pencil and then flipping and making the next one look rendered. I was doing the airbrush animation, colored pencil, paint, but everything. That's what people came to me for, was a more unique look. And so my skill, I do have a high skill level of lettering, brush painting, you know, I have all that. So when I started to do these pieces, I really did have I had the gift that if I thought about, something, I wanted to do something that was the piece of paper was my size. And then I was trying to think about what I would put on it. And then I saw a couple of these leaves and I went, oh, I want to do it that way. And I think I can paint those leaves. And so, whatever style I choose styles that I try them out first and go, yeah, yeah, I can do this. And I can express myself in that way. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. No, it does. It does. See, the next piece, the botanical prints, which I think is the first thing that I had seen, because there's a postcard of one of these up at Redefine RVA.
Oh, yes, they put that up for me.
Yeah, well, no, and I remember, like, I walked past it one day and I said, so it's what's this doing here? Why is this here? Because it just, this isn't someone lifting weights. This isn't someone out running. I'm like, this is cool. Why is this here? And that was kind of the introduction to like the story. And these remind me of like English botanical prints.
That's what I was going for.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm like, wow. And then, so can you tell us a little bit about these?
So there's 8 of them, and they're large, and each one has a secondary piece underneath it. And I found a yellowed paper that I wanted to use because I really was trying to emulate that British botanical paintings that are old. So I really love them so much. But the so the idea came to me. I mean, first the idea comes, and this house. I was living in this giant house with a half-acre of land, and Steve was the one who took care of all the outside yard, the plants and garden and all that stuff. And suddenly I'm doing it because he's gone, and I'm trying to take care of the inside of my house, my 2 children who are falling apart. I'm falling apart. And then I got these like plants outside and
And they're falling apart.
they're dying. And I don't know how to take care of these things. So they're dying, or there's weeds that I can't kill. And they're coming up all over the place. So I was feeling so upset about it. And I finally decided, well, what if I paint them and then I own them? Like I win again. They're not going to get the best of me, even though they died. So I went around and grabbed a bunch of dying stuff and I took some pictures of some of the weeds that were very healthy growing. And a lot of times people look at some of these weeds and they go, I hate that weed. I know exactly what that weed is, you know. So it so I had that idea, and then I'm thinking, well, how do I render them? Oh, what if, all those botanical whatever, those botanical illustrations are beautiful and perfect, and they're the plants at their height, they're flowering, they're just like at their peak. And I thought, well, what if I do them when they're dying and dead and looking crappy? But I make them look that way, make them look as perfect, I even took a class in Lewis Skinner Botanical Gardens in botanical illustration, just enough of the class. So, like, I want to do this and I want to learn a few things. And then I was like, okay, I'm done with the class. And the woman's like, no, we can go on. And I just got what I needed. Thanks. And left. And then underneath them, instead of Latin, because I have Italian background and I'm also studying Italian, I made these words in Italian and I chose words that each one of them is a contrast. So it's chaos and peace, rising and falling, darkness and light, disturbance and smoothness.
I think under one, it is Italian. Is it
Oh yeah, agitation and
Agita-
tranquility.
and tranquility. But it
Yeah,
looks, is it Italian?
it's Italian,
Yeah.
but it looks
Yeah.
Italian, Latin, Italian, very similar. But it had meaning. It was more meaningful for me to do it in Italian because of where I'm at.
Sure.
It's my world.
But
So
it's interesting. I thought that, again, that the contrasting text,
the contrast, what?
right? I mean, complete, incomplete, agitated, tranquil, for yet the same, I mean, two terms for the same plant.
Yes, and it was about I'm taking on these plants, and it's the first word is always the more negative word, and it's me moving into the opposite word by creating this piece of art. I got myself from agitation to tranquility, and this well there's the one that is the really dried yellow leaves.
Yeah.
It's just, I mean, that was that was a branch of a dead bush, and it's I I love those. I love the way I did these. I
But
mean, they look like and when I was painting them, they were just so delicate, and I had to really, really take my time. I can't make mistakes. It's watercolor. It's you got to go with what happens on there. So I had to be very, 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 very careful not to make any mistakes on this stuff.
they're gorgeous.
Oh, thank you.
It's the best looking dead branch I've seen.
Yes, thank you.
But it is, it's just, it is, when I looked at it, I went, oh, this is right out of some British botany textbook from the 1800s.
I tried. I
It's
tried.
it's gorgeous. And
There's
and
a
then and then you backslid or reverted back into more dynamic,
oh yeah, the last two.
the smashed art.
So that was this past January. Class starts again. The DC insurrection happened on January 6th. The class started on the 4th or something like that. And I am so freaked out about that insurrection, that invasion. And I'm trying to do art around that. Like I have to come up with 8 pieces. And I'm thinking all about, I made so many drawings about that insurrection, but everything was trite compared to what was really going on because we were living it in those first days. And I couldn't create anything that was as powerful as what I was seeing on television. I mean, it was just so scary to me. Um, and, this Black Lives Matter thing was, events were happening in the city, and I was going to Monument Avenue a lot to see what was happening there all throughout the year. And the pandemic, there was just these huge events in early
Oh yeah.
January that were all just converging on my brain. And meanwhile, last year I had moved out of my giant, beautiful house, and I downsized and I sold it, and I found a little house nearby and I renovated it and did that. But I had to do it all by myself alone because of the pandemic. I couldn't get help. And it was huge, huge, huge emotional and physical work I succeeded at. So now January comes and I'm trying to think of what am I going to do for these 8 paintings. And I want to express all that stuff that happened and was in the process of happening. We were still in it. All
We're
of that.
still in it now.
Yes. Yeah. And I needed some way to express that. And so I took a jar of my favorite pickles, Bubby's pickles, which, oh wait, I don't think that's one of these. No, it's not. So yeah, I took.
The first one are tomatoes, right? I think.
Yeah, it's a can of Cento canned tomatoes. Um, the one I started with was Bubby's Pickles, a jar, which is a beautiful label, and they're really delicious. And I put them out in my backyard, and I took a sledgehammer and I just sledgehammered the hell out of it. And pickles were flying, and I was going after the pickles with my sledgehammer, and I just felt like smashing stuff. I was so, ugh, I just, and I smashed that, and I smashed, well, 8 objects from my kitchen, and one of them was this can of Cento tomatoes. So I smash them. So there they are. It starts off with something I love, and then I destroy it, and then I take it and draw it, and they're on very large pieces of paper, like 42 by 42. They're really big, and those pencil drawings took a month or more to draw the pencil drawing. And so now it's very precious to me because I spent so much time on this pencil drawing. But that wasn't over. So then I wanted to destroy my drawings in some way. And one of my friends said, "Why don't you shoot it with a gun?" Like, or burn it, or we were trying to come up. I was going to erase it, but what I decided to do was take paint-soaked rags and throw them. I mean, it was very random. I didn't know where the paint rags would land, and I just stood out there in my backyard with the paintings, the drawings on the ground, and just had these wadded up rags that I'd open up and just throw them. And it was scary. And that was what I wanted. I wanted to feel that a second destruction. So it was like beauty, destruction, beauty, destruction. I need, it was just reflecting so much that was going on because things just kept happening and falling apart in the world. In Richmond. Every
Yeah.
time we think in the pandemic, every time we think things are getting better, now the variant shows up. And it just, it was, everybody's talking about it. It is a very emotional, taxing time emotionally for everybody. And we're all having our own journey. Some people are getting COVID, some people are dying. And so I needed to destroy this great drawing that I made. But in the end, well, I won't say but, we'll say and in the end, I own this. And it's a reflection of all of these ups and downs. And they're, and it's my finished piece of expressing all that. So in the end, it's a positive piece.
Well, and then that really just kind of circles us back to what I think is kind of the overarching theme, which is through painting, through writing, through music, through whatever means of self-expression you're comfortable with, you can improve how you feel by creating or expressing how bad you feel at the moment.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, this isn't just, oh, I think I'll paint a picture. This is therapy. This is
Oh,
self-care. And
totally.
and anyone can do it. I mean,
Yeah.
not anyone. There is only one person who can do what you do. And that's I really like the idea of like, we all have our voice. We all have our own voice. But because we all have our own voice, we can all express ourselves in our own way.
Yes.
And I think some people may find that kind of daunting, like, well, I could never do that. But it's like, no, you could sit down and write, you know what? Today was a bad day. And here's why.
Yeah.
But in the middle of this bad day, I found this and it was cool. And people will get that benefit.
Yes. And I guess, I do keep repeating this is that, and don't worry about somebody's going to look at it. I mean, I think all that journaling that you discuss is not for people to read that journal. I mean, that is your personal journal.
Right.
You're not going to share. That wasn't the goal of it, is to share a diary or a journal. I think that's the key, is just to be able to sit down and write a song, or or a poem, or a little short story. And like you said, it could be terrible, but it doesn't matter if you can just get that to that feeling. And it might take a lot of tries. I mean, I think
Yeah.
you do one, and then the next day you try again, and it's better or worse than the first one. And then the third one is going to be, then you got something to compare to. It's like, oh, I liked what I did on that second line, or I like the way I drew that line. Let me try
Right. But
that line over here.
with the emphasis being it's yours.
Yeah, yeah,
It's yours to do with as you see fit. It's you can share it with whoever you want. It's not about is it good. Good is, do I feel better having done this?
yeah,
That's good. If you
yeah,
feel better having done that, that's good.
yeah. I mean, this to me, this now is maybe a 5-year journey that um, I've been on, and I had no idea when I did that first one about Paris. I thought that was a one-off, and I'm going back to my little still lives, but it wasn't. Who knows? You don't know where it's going, and this my journey. This teacher, Michael Pierce, he changed my life. I mean, he just totally changed my life because he happened to be tapping in to what I wanted and needed, and his message and the way he taught that class, teaches that class, um, is works for me and worked for a lot of people in the class.
Well, I really want to thank you for most importantly for sharing this with us because they're gorgeous, powerful works of art, but they're also very personal, and I recognize that, and I know that's it's not always an easy thing to do. Put yourself out there like that, and I just hope that the folks who listen from this or listen to this will get maybe some encouragement to take a stab at doing something like this. Just because there is a way you can feel better without requiring prescription medications or yeah I mean it it works. It works. And what a better world we would have if folks spent more time creating and less time destroying things, right?
Nice point. Your point is well taken. I was happy to have this time to talk to you about it because from where you're coming from, I never thought about the science behind all this. And I mean, it's absolute. I'm a total advocate of it and an example of what you're describing.
Yeah, no, I think and again there's always a path forward. It's just a matter of finding it. And
Yeah.
it's not always easy. And
Yeah.
it's just, I mean, you and I have talked, I mean, certainly, um, there was a lot of trauma in my life, both physically and emotionally. And um, I did a lot of writing and got back into playing a lot of music. And that was my way to kind of work through a lot of this.
Yeah, I'm sure now we're like not on your this is not for publication, but when I watch you play music, I could see you loving what you're doing and totally into it. I mean, it's like I recognize that. Like I'm not a musician and I don't know how to play, and I'm amazed and fascinated by all of it, but I could recognize it on your face how much
It,
you
it,
love what it is and how not lost you're not lost in it, but you're so in it that you're 100%, you're giving it 100%. That's what it looks
Absolutely.
like.
And I'm sure you get it when you hit that, you hit your stride with something like this. We go, got it. And it's working.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a really cool thing.
Mm-hmm.
And it's true whether you're painting, whether you're playing music, whether you're building a cabinet, whether you're painting your house. It's all the same thing.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
there's just that moment where you kind of realize like this is really cool.
yeah. Well, you hope that everybody gets to experience that. I mean, you really hope, because now that I've experienced it, I want everybody to have that, get that feeling. It's that little, um, it's really addictive to get that feeling every time. You know, I look for it. If I don't draw, I don't. You know, I mean, maybe I could take a good walk or a nice bike ride, but I'm always hunting because I like that feeling so much. I want it again.
Well, and I think to some extent, the idea that I was sort of raised with the idea that you should leave the world a little better than you found it.
Hmm.
And so the idea that maybe you've created something that people will look at later and go, "Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, I know
You
that's a
know, this
bonus.
wasn't here before you got here."
But
And
and that's
and
a bonus. I mean, that is totally
right,
unexpected.
right. Well, and the other thing I think for me is and this gets, you know, again, we're moving away from the idea of sort of self-care and the therapeutic aspects of doing this. But there's another part of this, and this is kind of a weird thing for me to kind of say this, but the music, the things that I write, the music that I've composed or that I've played and that I've got stashed all over the place, um, there will come a day that I'm not here. But the people that know me or knew me, my son, Debbie, they can go to that
Yeah,
and you're still there.
yeah, it's very touching. Yeah.
Right. I mean, that's kind of a cool, that's another bonus. I mean, that's not why I do this. It's not like, oh, well, I'm writing my last will and testament, you know,
Right.
but like, hey, you know what? Yeah, man, you know, that was my dad,
Yeah, that's a good point.
you know, and I think that's kind of a cool thing. And those, that sense of connectedness is it's lacking in our society right now.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, and
Well,
so the
it's
idea of
not
like, well, you know what, here's something that brings people together.
right, right, right.
And that's a
Because it's not big and flashy. It's like, it's not big and
big and flashy is a false god.
flashy. I agree.
It is. So, well, I told you we wouldn't get this done in 30 minutes. We're now an hour and 20 into this.
Okay, okay.
Um, I really want to thank you for taking the time and going through this. Your work is gorgeous. The story is just powerful. Um, and I really hope that folks who listen to this maybe we'll have the motivation and the courage to move forward and to try something like this, even if it's just doodling on a piece of paper or jotting down your thoughts for the day, because it's powerful medicine.
Yeah,
So,
thank you.
Janet, thank you very much.
Thank you. You're a
I
good
really
interviewer.
appreciate it. This has been another Consults Over Coffee. I'm Dr. Michael Jones. This is Janet Scagnelli. We'll be back in a week. Have a good day.